to introduce to our last dear speaker for today's conference, Professor Sharlene Hesse Biber, who is joining us this morning for her from Boston.
From Maine, actually.
Oh, all right, you're actually in Maine. Okay, so you're also teaching online, I guess. Yeah, yeah. So, Professor Hess Beaver is affiliated with Boston College in Massachusetts, and I actually met you in one of the past international qualitative conferences in Urbana-Champaign in Illinois quite a few years ago. And over the course of her career, Sharlene has actually published extensively from one side on feminist issues like body image and women's health, but also extensively on mixed methods research, qualitative research, but mixed methods research as well. And not only that, but she is also, if I remember correctly, co-developer of Hyper Research. Is that correct? Yeah. And I'm happy to mention this because I remember that in our conferences of qualitative methodology from the under the auspices of the Israeli Center for Qualitative Methodologies, there have been a couple of times in which researchers based in the US came here and presented their research that was conducted with Hyper Research, and it actually raised a lot of questions about the use of the tool. And of course, one of the first questions were, does this tool support Hebrew? We have. Yeah, well, so the characters go the other way around, so it's quite an issue for us. Yeah. So that was one of the first questions, and I'm very happy that that you are here today with us, and I think that I mean your talk comes very naturally after Sharon's talk about contraception and feminist and women's issues, and despite I believe that your talk is going to be much more methodologically loaded, I guess that the examples are actually from your current and past research. So I have to thank COVID for providing us this opportunity to hold this day online and allowing the opportunities to actually invite and share our day with scholars from abroad without paying a very heavy toll on the climate. So thanks again for being with us, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks to you, to Maya, and all the people that make Israeli Center for Qualitative Research of People and Societies at Ben-Gurion University a reality, because I'm really excited to be here today. I love Israel. I want to go back so badly. And it was such a wonderful
We'll
match.
invite you back the minute we can.
Thank you. But it's just a pleasure to be here today. And Paula, thank you for reflecting a little bit on my journey, because it's really interesting. I started out as a quantitative person at the University of Michigan when I was a grad student, and it was filled with survey research centers and quantitative data, which I was steeped in. But when it came down to writing my dissertation, I looked around me and the question was, which of your professor's studies do you want to be part of? It's a quantitative study, so you'll take a piece of it. And I said, I don't think so. And that's what started my journey towards really asking, which I already had begun asking. I started with asking questions, which is where I'm going to take us today. With survey research, it was all methods, validity, reliability. It was, everybody knew it was a confirmatory question. So, we need to concentrate on the methods, which usually was survey research. And we got the assumption, because you're a positivist, you always do research, that's survey research, which is not true. Positivists can take qualitative methods, they can do ethnographies, they can do all kinds of things in combining methods, but they're asking, when they're doing that, a kind of qualitatively driven method that is helping, usually the helper, honestly helping quantitative research to become more real, to give it a life, So we're willingly the second best, and we go along with that. Well, for me, my dissertation had to be qualitatively driven because I kept on asking, why, as a demographer, that I was studying demography, population flows, migration, people are saying these people are pushed and pulled. And I'm thinking, are they like really literally pushed and pulled? And that was their view of people, they were pushed and pulled. And I said, I don't think I can deal with this. So I went over to, I was literally in tears. I went over to my advisor and said, Dr. Tilley, his name is Charles Tilley, does social movements. I don't know what to do. He said, well, what do you want to know? I want to know about the lived experience of migrants. I want to try to understand why some of them don't follow the economic flow. They're not, always economically oriented. There are other reasons for this flow, why they're coming back against the grain. I want to go in stream, I want to talk to real live folks. He said to me, that's great. You need to go to Sweden. I go, you need to go to Sweden. He said, yes, you need to go to Sweden. I said, why? He said, because they have population registers and you literally can go in that stream, pick them out and interview them. I go, I'm on my way. Of course, I didn't know Swedish, number one. Number two, I didn't have the money to go. I was a grad student. I was poor. I didn't have any money, whatever. And he said to me, well, I just happened to be able to give you some money for that because, as you know, in a former life, I used to do migration flows. I said, well, you were part of the reason why I'm here. And he literally was, looking at networks of migration and family migration and occupational chains of migration that required people to be present and tell you things. And so I was on my way, and I spent literally 2 years in Sweden on this dissertation, which later was titled Migrants as Actors, which meant that, it was an active participation in their lived experience, that they had agency. And more importantly, what I felt, and I think it's important to understand that I had been doing mixed methods all along, except, I didn't label it. I didn't have a textbook that said one of these and one of those, and then you put them together. No, I was drawn by my questions to then ask about, what do I do next? And if it means that, I will also, embed a survey, small one, into my larger, in-depth interview, I didn't think I wasn't doing embedded mixed methods designs. Let's see, quant, qual, one of these, one of those. Oh my God, I'm stuck in this template. No, I just did it. You get my drift? Okay, this is what I'm saying. And this is why I'm here today, to tell you that I had a mental model that I brought with me that said, I am a curious person. I am led to ask certain things. And I couldn't just go to anybody because they were already programmed in a box to only do one thing, only one question, one method. And I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of this set of boxes, methods boxes, theory boxes, disciplinary boxes. I am a demographer without a home. Anyway, and it takes a lot to do this, and it wasn't easy. But if you have a passion, that's the other thing you have to bring with you. If you have a passion for what you do, you can overcome many things. So let's begin with my more formal presentation. And so what I'm going to try to do is, let's see, I guess I share my screen. Is that right? I hope I can. Oh my goodness. Let's see if I can even find it here. I hope that's it. Could that be it? Maybe. Oh, goody. Can you see it?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
All right. So let's see if it works. Okay. Well, why do I want to focus on this image? You know, this is in olden days, you know, carts, you know, do I want to focus on this cart? Should I be talking about putting carts before horses? And what does that have to do with mixed methods? Well, you know, in 2010, when I wrote my book on mixed methods, merging theory with practice, I said, don't put the cart before the horse. You know, it just blurted out me. You know, I just like thought about that one day when I was writing. And the whole idea is when I went to consult Phrase Finder in the website, it says putting the cart before the horse is a figure of speech. It was, you know, gotten from the Greeks, in which they said that the cart should, you know, should never, you know, be put first. You know, it's, you know, this putting the cart before the horse, in which the thing that should come second is put first. That's what it means. The notion of being the opposite of what rightfully should be. You know, why are we putting this image into mixed methods research? Why are we rushing to the method, to the box, to the template? And the question is kind of like flailing, you know, you don't even know where it is. And it's sort of, in many ways, you know, Phrase Finder also said, and it got me to thinking, it also said this idea of the notion of things being the opposite of what they rightfully should be seems to have played on the minds of the English at the time when modern English began to be formed, because you got this figure of speech in Shakespeare's The Tempest, Macbeth, Midsummer Night's Dream, and contained within this image and this theme was always the idea of the world turned upside down. And this world had magical elements. And I was thinking, this must be mixed methods. Because when you enter this mixed methods box, this cart before the horse, yada, yada, I argue that we get caught in a practice that exemplifies this perfectly. Mixed methods research has become all about which method, all about methods design. The major question is, which one of those boxes, you know which ones I mean, and we can say the mantra, you know, triangulation, sequential, embedded, is it explanatory, is it exploratory, is it yada yada exploratory? Who knows what it is? And here's the thing that I think is problematic. The contemporary, you know, my argument is that contemporary practice is a formalized practice of mixed methods, as you have maybe grown up with it, is characterized by a lack of understanding that the critical role that research problems play and theories play in steering our research. And, you know, some of these problems are unconsciously attached to theories because we have problems, and sometimes, you know, they come from somewhere. But sometimes especially when we're embedded in disciplines, they already tell us what theories we should have and what questions should flow from them. So we've been so robotic about this. It's really hard sometimes. We always look for a confirmatory question, and we're always running around after surveys. You know where I'm going. We're with that kind of disciplinary silo. And so disciplines promote this. Textbooks on mixed methods promote this. And there's such an under-theorizing of just what role, thinking and problems can play, and being playful about problems. Is this the right problem? Is this the wrong problem? But problems, issues are the motivators. And they help to guide us to, if we actually let them do it, they guide us, to certain kinds of questions, certain analytical methods, certain interpretive methods, the ways in which we envision our process. So, I think what's happened is we've been hijacked by a set of developments in mixed methods research that many of you probably didn't see coming, but it was sort of what I saw at the beginning. Coming is this kind of method-centric idea, this idea that you start with the method and everything else will work out. So mixed methods research focused on what I called this kind of methods as design as method, not design as a method of inquiry, but design as putting the horse before the cart. And I think we see that methodology theoretical perspective literally comes last. And I was thinking, now people will say to me, are you kidding? We all know that particular diagram isn't that way. Yeah, but actually, not mentioning anybody's names, in one mixed methods textbook, I did see the question last. And I was going, are you kidding? There it is. That's my example. But what can I say? So what about if we lived in a world where we didn't have, the cart before the horse? Well, I'd like to read you something I really like a lot that helps me find my way more. And before I tell you how we got that way, I want to read to you something from a research project that Valerie Janicek, who is a qualitatively driven researcher, describes her research design, because it looks nothing like this. But I want to show you something where these words don't really fit this design. And, people were asking her, she was doing research on the deaf community. And she said, when she was asked to reveal the kind of way she thinks about research and her research design. And especially, we are talking about qualitatively driven research. I know many of you are qualitative researchers and you're thinking, how can I bring in another method? But here the thing is, how can you bring in another approach? You're not bringing in methods. Methods can go to any methodology. What you're doing is bringing in different questions. So don't confuse method with methodology. So you're bringing in a different set of questions that you think may enrich, maybe upend what it is you're doing. And so what she's saying, that qualitative folks don't, they're after subjective experience. They're able, to tolerate a lot of ambiguity. My students say, I don't know where I'm going in this analysis. I'm lost. I said, that's a good thing. You'll be found, a couple of years later. But no, what I'm saying, sometimes you are. But for the most
part, it's difficult to convince when it happens in real time, to hold this all together.
Absolutely. I said, when they say in women's studies, you have that aha moment, oh my God, I'm a feminist. Well, you get that aha moment, but you got to work for it, okay? And it's not simple like confirmatory, test the hypothesis, the computer does the work for you. It doesn't happen that way, and neither does a software program for qualitative data analysis. It's not like that. Okay, so here's what Valerie says. She says that, I'm iterative, the process, the way I think, the methods that I use are iterative, meaning, you can't put them in a box. And she uses the following excerpt. She says the first set of design decisions have to do with what is studied, under what circumstances, what duration of time, with whom. She says, but I always start with a question. For example, when I studied deaf culture in DC over a 4-year period, my basic question was, how do some deaf adults manage to succeed academically in the workplace, given the stigma of deafness in our society? The basic question that I was after, this question, informed all of my observations and interviews, and led me to use focus groups and oral history techniques even later in my study. I had no trouble using a bunch of techniques as they unfolded, as my thinking about the problem unfolded at the same time. Both, so these came to evolve later. And she says, both the focus groups, I came to know the perspective on deafness of the individuals in my study. And I'm using this example to illustrate the elasticity of qualitatively driven designs. And I would say that's true even of quantitatively driven mixed methods designs. Elasticity is important. Fluidity is important. The willingness to shift and change based on things that you find. So I think this idea of just following the method or following the template, when we follow the template, we're stuck in a box, we can limit innovation. Very often what happens is in that box, along with the quant, is the qual, but it's always second best. So what it's also doing is limiting qual's ability to get us out of that box, to keep us out, to begin to have us maybe figure out what to do next. We try to contain it. We say that it is second best. Its idea is to help the quant shine. So let's put in some anecdotal quotes. Let's window dress. Let's make it look good to policymakers, put the juiciest quotes in that you can get, just bring them off. They'll, go after the great, pieces of fruit that you can then embellish onto the quant, and everybody is happy. Are they? What have you found out? How can it do something other than always be second best? So these are the kinds of things that were on my mind. And when I realized, and we'll get to more of what I mean being forced into a template, but when mixed methods, its second iteration, was developing in the 1980s, all I could see in the textbooks were notations of all kinds of boxes, sequential, and then they had variations and permutations on the boxes. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I'm going to mention a few of these movements that help to keep mixed methods method-centric. The movement towards formalized template designs. Some unexamined assumptions about mixed methods. Oh my God, mixed methods are inherently synergetic. 2 is better than 1. This idea that NIH and these other funding sources came out with mixed methods best practice guidelines for funding people that had only certain templates in them. Now, it did talk about questions, but that wasn't the big deal. The big deal was the template. And all of these 3 developments that I'm going to try to quickly talk about had the result of reinforcing mixed methods as method-centric, marginalizing qualitative methods, and so on. So, the movement started early towards this mixed method-centric approach. And what do I mean by that? Well, people already called it a third methodological movement. You began early on. I didn't know this until later, that I thought NIH came out with guidelines for mixed methods in 2011, but actually they were buried in the back of the 1999 guidelines, but they were still the same in 2011. And it was amazing that they were just diagrams, and all of them focused on mixed methods as methods design. And then you remember, what's the timing of the method? First or second? What's the priority? What's the sequencing? And I kept on thinking, oh my goodness, now I got to get this all in mind. I would see, you know, a lot of the boxes, first, second, big qual, small qual, all of those notations, remember, dominant, you know, you had unequal. I just can't, all I can tell you is my brain was going in overdrive. And, you know, I could, you know, and here's the thing. When I teach mixed methods, I use designs in the beginning because students need to hang on to something. And I'm not dissing design, but when design is the focus and we don't talk about the problem, the students get the ideas. I got to find what box I want, and then I'll fit something in it that will make somebody happy. And this is how it went decade after decade. With what happens is the folks that that started this very often, and the studies that came out of this were quantitatively driven studies. So we never got the idea that, you know, we thought this was the dominant mode of doing mixed methods. And even though in the healthcare field, we started doing some qualitatively driven methods, outside of the healthcare field, we're still doing dominantly quantitatively driven mixed methods. People say, you know, that's a long time ago. Well, you know what? We're still doing it. We've made some inroads in healthcare, but that's about it. So, you know, the whole idea when people talked about design was, you know, how do I implement it? How do I choose one? And so what happened over time was a research project became an empirical project, and emphasizing the right design. You know, Guest said, conducting mixed methods has become deliberate, static, and mutually exclusive. That's it. And I remember, ring, ring, the phone rang one day. Woman was desperate on the phone that I knew. She said, Sharlene, we're applying for a grant right now. I go, oh, that's good. She goes, no, you don't understand. I'm a mess because they want some model. Going, which model? She goes, I think it's sequential something or other. So I pull out, you know, I said, go to the thing and tell me what it is. Here's the model. And she said, here's the thing, Sharlene, it doesn't fit that box. You know, what am I going to do? And I said, okay, you ready? She goes, yeah. What do you want to know? She goes, okay, tell me. No, you tell me. What do you want to know? And within 5 minutes, we had her design. It didn't look like any of those. I'm letting you know. And it probably will change. And she goes, that's it? You mean I've been worried about? I said, yeah. And they don't know that. But what are you going to do? You're going to force fit it. And that's what people started doing. And so I would get grad students at workshops coming up to me and telling me the following. My dissertation, if I'm here because I'm quantitative, don't tell anybody. We're at the ICQI meeting. But she said, I'm here to learn more about qualitative work. I go, okay. She said, no. She said, I was told by my advisor I needed to do a mixed method study because a qualitative study wasn't rigorous enough. And I needed to add a quantitative component onto it. I go, really? She goes, yeah. So tell me what to do. I go, what do you want to know? I said, you only need one method right now. She goes, but I need two. And I said, it's not method, it's the question. What kind of question can you use that might come from a more quantitatively driven methodology like positivism? could you do an experiment or survey? But you need to know why you're doing it and what's the question and how is it going to relate to what your overall goals are of your study. Don't lose your way, because once you put that in there, and as we found out, many other people had, because they believed in the power of mixed methods, they wound up with mixed up methods, as Sandalowski calls them, mixed up as crazy as mixed up could be, like literally mixed up. I'm serious. You couldn't untie it. You couldn't untie it. So what did people do that spent all this money? Is they published the study separately, if they could, if they even knew what the question of the quant study was. Maybe they could. But when Bryman and when O'Cathan decided to study what it is that mixed methods researchers actually do, they started hearing stories like, we don't know what to do. And I know we have tons of really good people in the field now that are talking about how do we do this, and how we can think about things like integration. But sometimes it's not a question of integrating anything. We have to talk about how paradigms are not necessarily, able to be meshed together. But what they can do is each one can illuminate a different facet of something. Okay. We know it's possible that you can get a much richer understanding without integrating. And that in many ways, it allows you to see different aspects of a problem in a different way, because we're asking slightly different things. Now, there are some ways in which these things can follow from one another, and you can say, I have these survey results and I have outliers. Let me bring in next a qual study to enable me to understand more. I want to go in, like I did with the migration stream, and find out what about these outliers? How can I learn from them? And maybe then create a different set of questions that I can then later explore, either from the ground up, by asking questions and then developing a grounded survey. But you see where I'm going. I know where I'm going once I hook on to this idea of, what is it I want to know? A simple, I know it sounds crazy, but what I also want to say to you, the very beginning of, my roots in sociology go back to the Chicago School of Sociology. And, I had incredible training in the field of sociology from largely quantitative mentors, but I learned a lot by reading early studies that were done in Chicago School, where people were doing, like Park and Burgess and others, were doing mixed methods, but they didn't call it anything. They had no trouble doing it. They wrote fantastic stuff. They didn't say one of these followed by one of those. I mean, they had this.
They were not binded by stickers or by labels. Yeah.
Thank you, Paula. So do you see what I mean? So before you do your study, you got to loosen up a little bit. You've got to really be centered. You need to be, you are the data collector. You are the person that's doing this. So I think you have to allow yourself that confidence that, you know where you're going. But when you take that confidence and you put it in a box, you can kind of lose your way. And let me read you something that really struck me so hard when I was thinking about this and preparing this today. I go back to when I taught my mixed methods course, I had my students keep a diary of what was happening, because many of them walked in with a mono methodology and a mono method. That's what I got. I got disciplinary silos in my class. And I was supposed to then, because they, most people that are now teaching mixed methods were not taught by anyone. They learned it on their own. And they learned it from their given disciplinary point of view. I learned mixed methods having been both a quantitative researcher and a self-taught qualitative researcher when I took up mixed methods. I knew about paradigms. I knew, but when you walk in a mixed methods class, that's what you often find. So here's what the student said when we talked about the topologies and templates that I was talking about and this implementation strategies to these mixed methods designs and textbooks. He said, quote, I want to talk to you about the topology of mixed methods research designs. He said, at first I thought they were really helpful for learning. After reading through all the models, it was a significant reference point for me for the remainder of the course. I don't regret this, but it was a mixed blessing. It was very tempting to depend on it, since stepping outside of it meant lacking clarity to me. Once I stepped out, I lost my way. Sometimes this felt like a little confining or dishonest. In constructing my final research proposal for class, it dawned on me at one point that I had added in extra components to my research design in order to make it look interesting, more mixed methodsy, is the term he used, at the cost of losing connection to my research question. I wanted to use a sequential exploratory design, but when I tried it, it was awkward. I couldn't maintain a clear, fitting purpose for the quantitative phase of the study. It was tempting to consider overlooking this. After all, I was still following the text, but maybe my thinking could have been broader. A different topology might have been more useful. But you see how that person is wavering between holding on and letting go. And that's important, holding on, letting go. You have to let go, but you need to hold on in the beginning, right? Because this is so new and it's all about methods. And you say, no, it's not. And then all of a sudden, it's like that aha moment. Methodology is not method. Oh my goodness, but everybody's mixing them up. Here they are, So, there were others like Janice Morse, incredible lady, wonderful woman, credible mentor to her students, and others like Julian Cheek, who are qualitatively driven mixed methods researchers that are upset about why it is you can't talk about using two different qualitative methodologies. Isn't that multiple methods also mixing quote unquote methods? Something to think about. And she, early on in 1991, was, in many ways an outlier, where she actually talked about the question, determining the design. It was there, but it got displaced. It was talking about philosophical complexity and how you have to think about whether or not paradigms, can be mixed, and not with a mixed up idea of pragmatism, I'd like to say. So, it kind of lost this lost footing. It's now back. Janice written a brand new edition of Qualitatively Driven Mixed Methods. But it led, again, back to the idea of students saying, which of the design should I pick? One of these, what would I do? Help me. And very, very quickly, as I mentioned before, people lose analytical guidance. They delink once they delink the theory from the method from the theory, and the results are 81 mixed method studies where only 25% were integrated their qual and quant findings, and it was a real lack of reflexivity regarding what happens when there was no synergy in these approaches because people didn't know how to use them. Yet synergy guided, and this movement grew, this movement of centrism grew, claiming inherent synergy in a synergistic qualities, two's better than one. Even though Jennifer Green talked about the idea can have intrinsic synergy, it has the possibility of it. But soon Bryman pointed out, even in 1997, Jennifer Green and Valerie Caracelli were careful to say it's not inherent. It could have the possibility. But Bryman then noted this particularistic discourse that Jennifer and Valerie Caracelli were talking about soon became a universalistic discourse. Mixed methods, is automatically synergistic. 2 is better than 1. For example, multiple methodology simply constitutes a more adequate science. It's a promissory science, however. The use of quantitative, qualitative in combination, a better understanding of research problems than either approach alone. So mono methods are dis now. Mixed methods research recognizes the importance of traditional quant research, but also offers powerful third paradigm. I don't see a third paradigm. Methods are not paradigms. You're mixing them up. It's mixed up. No wonder my students are having trouble. And this idea of paradigm choice provides most informative, complete, balanced, and useful. One stop fits all. Now, here's the thing. People did believe that. You had mixed methods practice. You had ecologies of learning mixed methods. There are certain researchers that were talking about the interaction effect of getting all these people together, getting all hipped up with synergy. You sprinkle on, it's like a magical elixir almost. Remember I talked about magical thinking? There it is. I talked about NIH guidelines, this idea of getting paradigm status. You use one of these, it's golden guidelines. If you don't have them, you don't get funding. I hope not, but here's the designs, here they come. And then any other design is put in it's called multi-phase. But they're all based on empirically based praxis. There's more about notations than there is about how you use them. We never get a manual on what do you do with them.
I put the link of the 2011 best practices thing in the chat of the conference. Yeah.
Yeah. So here we go. We're on board the cart. It's goal rush time. Let's go. Let's get the synergy moving here. Okay. You know where I'm going with this. The books were being bought up. And, here's the thing. I once went up to someone that was working in the library on a mixed methods project. She had 5 different mixed methods books, textbooks. And I said to her, she said, I don't get it. I got to go to the next one and then the next one. And she thought, well, if I read more of them, more would be better. Not really. What do you want to know? And that scared me. That really scared me. Not to mention later on in 2006, the early 2000s saw the beginning of a serious discussion of the appearance of questions and theories there was a concern that the current state of practice of mixed methods research was totally problematic, and often with qualitative aspects of the study being fitted in to a clearly positivist and pragmatic study. And so it was such devaluing concerns that many researchers had that if this devaluing went on, what was going to happen to the monomethod idea, and all of that innovation that we find that we get, when qualitative is really used full strength. Most qualitatives were used, qualitative components were dumbed down in a lot of ways, serving a very small segment of what a qualitative study is able to do. So there was a lot of concern and talk, and people then try to play it down and saying, well, let's look at some studies already. Cresswell and Mason's studies took issue with the idea that qualitative research is taking a secondary role. I hear that, but This happened in the healthcare field, where we do see a lot more of this in the health sciences that give priority to qualitative research. And so that's a good thing, but we need to expand those ideas of early Chicago school, Frederick Laplace, Charles Booth, Roundtree. All these early projects were so mixed methods rich. And why can't we bring it back? Why can't we bring the problem back, center, focus? Why is it so difficult for us to do this, where we're led? And sometimes if I see research questions, you can see there, if I had a dotted line that went from theoretical perspectives to research question, many times this is unconscious. When I walk into a classroom and say to the students, what are some of your favorite questions? They'll tell me, and I said, wow, that's from, did you know it's attached to a certain assumption about the world? Students have a hard time, I know, thinking about paradigms, thinking about theories, and I said to them, I could do it another way. If you said to me, as one student said in my class, well, Sharlene, I always loved doing content analysis, so that's what I'm going to do. I said, okay, so you're starting with a method. He said, yeah. I said, so here's the important thing. Understand that if you did this method, this is what it's about. Is there a question around that you think would be a good fit using this kind of method? In other words, if somebody wants to pick a method, they want to start that way, you say, okay, so what kind of method might lend itself to this question, might lend itself to that method? And we went around and around, and I said, and did you know that that kind of question is also tied to some way of thinking about the world? You don't have to use those words, paradigm, methodology, but there's the idea that that questions come from someplace. Okay. And somebody then said to me, well, what's a mixed methods question? Do we spend a lot of time even talking about that? And so I think it doesn't have to be all abstract. It has to be concretized, and we need to walk people through the way we do things. We don't show many of the things that we do. We never really show what we do. We don't show how things are mixed up when we first start out. Behind the scenes, what is it really like to do this? And so you have to be open. You have to show the inner workings of how this is done, usually I find very valuable using case studies. So the type of research question, the type of research design, research questions, problem-driven design is critical to avoid the cart before putting the horse before the cart, having, is that the cart before the horse? Ongoing iterative relationship with the question, and so I want to give you real quickly how you can think of some ways to do this. So I wanted to show you a little bit, take you through a kind of just a real quick example that I made up, but not really, because I've been thinking about this problem. So we have a lot of problem with antibiotic resistance. It's a big issue. And kids are always getting earaches, going to the doctor. They said, I can't give your son any antibiotics, your daughter any, I'm not supposed to do this, yada, yada. So there's growing resistance to antibiotic medications. It's a huge problem. And I want to be able to understand it. I want to do something about it, whatever. So maybe the first thing you might begin with, what are the dimensions of this problem? There could be different dimensions to be addressed. And of those dimensions, what kind of questions would emanate from those dimensions? And what kind of methodology? Now here we're getting into serious language here, right? What design or designs are appropriate for answering each of the questions? So let's work this confronting antibiotic resistance. What are some of the dimensions? I can tell you there's a high public demand for antibiotics. That's fueling some of this. and I see this just from my observations, maybe it's, I get the question in the air. Sometimes I do a database search. There are many ways with literature review, stakeholders, all those folks can weigh in and help you figure out, what's happening around here. What are people complaining about, concerned about? Another big thing, if you're in a certain discipline where you're in a bio lab and you're trying to figure out, what can you do to create new antibiotics that are not going to be resistant to X, Y, and Z, bacterium, whatever. So there's a lack of alternative treatments. And how do we get more? And how also can we understand this overprescription of antibiotics by physicians and others overall? And there are tons of other questions I could ask. So what questions emanate from each of these dimensions? So what about things like, why does the public demand antibiotics over other treatments? Public attitudes, motivations, that's what that's getting at. What alternative treatments would be effective, if I want to get to that question? Or why do physicians overprescribe antibiotics? Or if you don't want to have it go in a certain direction, what are physicians' attitudes about overprescription or antibiotics in general? Do they also feel that some physicians can overprescribe things? Whatever, but that's sort of in that area. And so worked example, what design or designs might be appropriate for answering those questions? What about the question, why does the public demand antibiotics over other treatments? Maybe potentially a qualitative, quantitative, and I'd love to hear from the audience about this. What about alternative treatments? Quantitative RCT, could we put a qualitative in there? Why do physicians overprescribe? So this, what I'm trying to say is, these are some of the ways that we can start creating these links between problems and designs. And sometimes we need to bring in other disciplines, which means we need interdisciplinary perspectives. And also, how do we get together when we're working this out across our disciplines so that our questions and our concerns and our views of the world are adequately heard across our disciplinary divides? And this is a challenge right now for mixed methods researchers, because what happens in interdisciplinary groups, especially in healthcare, that I've noticed and talked about this in an article on interdisciplinary mixed methods research in healthcare, is that this is a huge impediment crossing disciplinary divides to really get at wicked problems. It's a real problem that we need to resolve. And how qualitatively driven methodologists are often treated in these interdisciplinary groups is problematic to begin with. So you can see already that there's an infrastructure that has to be in place if we're going to move, and not just be where the qual is making the quant look good, even when we're doing this kind of work. Okay, so these are, some of the ideas that I wanted to talk about. Asking questions requires flexibility, a view of interdisciplinary where different perspectives are appreciated, reflexivity, and so on. Thinking of mixed methods as a framework and not a mold. And, honestly, that's all I want to say at this point, because we're running out of time.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Thank you very, very much.
I would like to.
I have a lot of questions, but let us first see if someone in the audience wants to present a question about your talk, or a specific point that you've raised during your talk. So if someone wants to open their mic and present a question for Sharlene.
Didn't hear that.
Okay. So can I ask a question? I use the opportunity. Abuse my abuse my spotlight.
Yes, Gal has raised their hand.
Oh, I didn't see it. Okay, who is that?
Now she can talk. Ayelet, you can talk now.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Ayelet.
Hi.
I,
I wanted to ask about the example we just gave.
yeah,
And the assumption that you first gave about the resistance to antibiotics.
yeah.
Yeah, so this assumption, shouldn't it be is supported by another study? So it's like I had like a missed link there. Where you answered my question?
It's you mentioned something about antibiotic resistance, right?
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure what the question was.
Yeah. So the questions that you asked were based on the assumption that there is antibiotic resistance. So,
Right. Well, some of these questions, once you get them, could come from the literature that shows that this is a big issue. Sometimes there could be stakeholders that raise these issues that want to try to understand, something about, there may be some factual basis for these things, which people are talking about a lot now. But the whole issue is what's driving this antibiotic resistance. And what people have been saying in some of the literature is that part of it is being driven by doctors who can't say sometimes no to parents whose kid is screaming in the office, wanting the pain to go away. And the mother says, I'm not leaving here without a prescription. And those are anecdotal reports. But what we want to try to do now is take the view of putting this kind of study through a scientific method for capturing the lived experience and reality of what is out there. If we want to generalize, we're going to have a design that allows us to make certain generalizations. We might want to also go in there first with an exploratory study to make sure that we have the range of things out there that might be of concern, do a lit review. And, this is just the beginning of the process of what we might be doing.
but what I wanted to ask is how would you research the part about the antibiotic resistance if it can be researched with the mixed methods?
Well, that's the question. What kind of design? So I'm going to throw it back on the audience. What do you think would be some, I made some suggestions. What might a qualitatively driven approach bring to the table? What would be the questions it might be interested in asking that is it about something about subjective experience, for example? What might an experimental approach driven by a more positivist frame bring to bear on this issue? And if at all, how can one way of looking at something inform the other? And how would these things, and somehow or other, lead to and generate a good theoretical drive about this, which would be one of my goals.
There are quite a few articles on antibiotic resistance, and especially about antibiotic resistance stewardship programs that were put in place into hospitals. I recall of a very interesting study conducted in 5 different hospitals in France. And there, if I recall correctly, we saw that how the dynamics inside the hospital helped change the prescribing behaviors of doctors in different hospitals, just by the fact that they are good friends of the doctors who led the specific stewardship program antibiotic stewardship program. So it's something completely, you know, interpersonal and nothing to do with do the kids cry or don't cry at the doctor's office, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It tackles it at a system level, you know. It's looking, you know, how can we create an environment where we can go out of our way to have an intervention that may help us in the long run to bring down that use of antibiotics. And here, you know, you could even think about different experimental design. Did this intervention work? Did that work? And then have a qual study to sort of interview people. What worked and why did it work? So you follow up that intervention or that RCT, experimental or quasi-experimental design, with a set of qualitatively driven questions. You know, why did it work? Why did the rates go down? And you know, it's fun just to think about. What I think is that if we can get students to be playful about this and to really begin to bring some people from different backgrounds, different disciplines engaged in that question-driven process, you can begin to see all the innovation and, you know, and not leaving out alternate points of view. Why would you do that? I mean, having people need to fight for their question being included in and justifying, you know, we call this justified mixed methods research designs. They're justified. We know that it's gone through this process. And it's iterative, you know, and then what do we find and how do we, you know, very often we do it and we leave the question. No, let's build on it. Let's continue to be iterative. If we're going to deal with wicked problems, we need to do that because the problem may be shifting as we're beginning to get a handle on it. It may shift again. Anyway.
Last question, Hesse want to ask, and then we have to finish.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was really inspiring and fascinating. There was a word that I was missing in your suggestions, that it's the hypothesis. Where does it come to play in you know, driving my research design? I have the questions, but without the hypothesis, I would be lost in terms of what road should I follow.
Well, the nice thing about positivism, it's confirmatory. You do know, you see the question and you kind of test it, right? It doesn't change, right? Because that's what you want to do. And so there's nothing wrong with that. What I'm saying is that that's the way it works. That's the way that paradigm is set up, right? But you know, the wheel of science, you know, you either, if you didn't confirm it, then you go back and maybe you ask a different set of other questions, and then you come up with something else that you want to test out. And usually in that framework, we ask a set of, you know, null hypotheses. You know, there's a certain way we go about doing that. And that's why early on, mixed methods didn't run into trouble, because it dealt with confirmatory questions that were directly linked to something they knew was going to work. Except when it didn't, then they had to go back and figure out what to do after that. So often methodology, people say in a positivist frame, was truncated into method. Okay. And that's where we didn't have to question it, because it seemed to go together. It seemed to give me, I had no headache.
Yeah, I also remember that in the previous ways of grounded theory, the word, the idea of working hypothesis was also something, a very practical tool to organize your thoughts and even be reflective about your own research. So that work with qualitative research, but not as a confirmatory or disconfirmatory issue, but rather as a way of organizing your thoughts and being reflective about the data collected. Yeah.
Absolutely. And to know that qualitative researchers can do analytical induction, abduction, all of those things that you associate with another paradigm. but here we are. Methods and paradigms are not inherently tied to a given paradigm. Positivists can use qualitative methods. We've got this language that we're stuck in, and we need to get unmixed a little bit. Anyway, it's fun to do this. This is what I think. It's got to be fun.
Definitely. So first of all, thank you very much for your wonderful and enlightening talk. It was really, really, really great. And without knowing what you were talking, or you were going to talk about at the end of our day. At the beginning of the day, I say that the common denominator I found between all our speakers was passion. And as you speak, you are the embodiment of all this. So I'm so glad that my prediction worked. I think that the message of not losing your way when you're doing your research and having your research question, be your light tower the whole way from the conception of the study, but also in order to perhaps confront the political intricacies of your disciplinary silo. That is also a very powerful tool that I think that we should all take this message with us as we embark on our next projects. And I think that this is a very important message that you delivered today.
Thank you so much, Paula and Maya. And I'd be happy to give you the reference for my disciplinary healthcare. It was in qualitative health research.
Yes.
And I tell you, when I did that, my eyes were open. I mean, and the nice thing to say is that pursue your passion. It's a passion and will take you, do something you care about. Do something that matters to you. We only go around once. I wish we got around more than once, but maybe. But
maybe, who knows?
Make it count. Make it count. Take a risk. Ask questions. Be brave. Be brave. Be centered. You can do it.
Great. That's a wonderful way to finish, with passion and bravery.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thanks to everybody. And you can feel free to let me know if you have any comments, you want some references. I'm available. Just email me, hesse@bc.edu. But I just, I love this center. I love the energy that I feel that are embodied. Talking with Paula and Maya, you have synergy and energy. It is glad to know this. So
thank you so much,
and
we hope to see you again in Urbana next year, hopefully.
I'll be giving a workshop.
Excellent.
Great.
I'm going to get you a free pass if I can. I don't know.
Let's just hope we could get there. That's the part we're not sure about.
I really miss everybody, and and I hope we can gather again. So stay well, everyone. God bless you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you